Hi again. Okay, so that video cut out as well. So we're in part 3 of this. Hope this is going to be the last video for tonight, though. Sorry about the videos cutting out. I haven't got the best technology. I try my best. So yeah, but hopefully hopefully this is working for you. Hopefully you'll getting something out of it. Okay. So as I was finishing up there, so symbols filtering down through consciousness from these planes to help us remember who we are. Okay, pyramid is one of those things. The pyramids were not built by aliens. Okay, the pyramids were built by us. Okay, but they were built by us, but they are ethereal. There is a metaphysical there is metaphysical meaning about them. They are forgive me, they are, like I said, symbols, a symbol which has filtered down to us from other levels of consciousness. And there are many symbols, I think, that have fallen, that have filtered down to us from in a similar way. Okay, but the pyramid is a very strong representation. I think again of Seth, all it is. Seth from Seth Speaks, and I'm gonna wrap this bit up because I need to go back to the eternal child aspect. But but like I said, there are that vision of the pyramid represents the totality of all it is. Okay, with each layer, with each tier of the pyramid representing more complexification and of different dimensions and planes and so on, from the top down. Okay, so that's basically what it represents. That's basically it. Okay, so yeah, okay, so I just want to finish up now with the eternal child. We took a bit of a detour, but I think it's lovely. I think what talking about these things also helps with is to, I want this to be as accessible as possible to everyone. It's not just that, but to be a bit lighthearted, or just to show a bit of representation of, the diversity, to make, because I know for some people they may approach this with trepidation or just hesitation, or be cynical maybe towards some of this, because of maybe religious trauma, and so on and so forth. What we're trying to do is make this more accessible for everybody, as well, to show you that that all people of all backgrounds, that language doesn't need to be a barrier or belief, that this is for everybody. Okay, that God loves everything and everyone, that this isn't about dogma or doctrine, and not that I have any, I have nothing against religion at all. I think there's a lot of beauty and in a lot of incredible things to be found in the teachings of world religions and traditions. I've been inspired a lot by them. Okay, but again, I think I just want to show you as well some of the beautiful things that God does, and just the humor and the playfulness sometimes of God, and how the different ways in which it can come through to us, the way that it's not actually one thing, it represents itself in men. So think about it, Pope Francis. So I can't tell you, for instance, I mean, I felt, forgive me, darling, I'm channeling as I'm speaking. I felt Pope Francis coming through to me, like I said, when he passed. Okay, but whether Pope Francis was the one whether that was Pope Francis or whether it was God that came through as Pope Francis in that moment. Okay, now that's the question. Okay, that is a question, because I have a feeling that it could be that was actually God, all it is. Okay, potentially. Okay, but maybe not. And because but then I also know that Pope Francis has come through. Okay, so again, but never mind. It still represents the same sort of teaching. I am of the Father, you are my child. Ananda Mayima, you are my children. Okay, you are my children. God appearing to me today as Krishna, okay, a humongous blue being, I don't, a massive, just giant, like I said, huge blue being, okay, and other representations, not even very simple things that it does, okay, our higher selves. And yes, I was just hearing like our higher self sometimes come through. So maybe it's the higher self of Pope Francis that came through, okay, on that occasion, okay. So that's very possible. Regardless, and I think Pope Francis would be the sort of person to say something like that to someone, okay. I think he would, okay. He has been very supportive, okay, in that sense as well. There's a paternal sort of air about the, in that sense, the paternal sort of feel about his presence, that has he's come through to me in the past anyway. So it wouldn't surprise me. But the point is, and the theme remains the same. And what I said about, forgive me, Sinead O'Connor, Sinead O'Connor and Prince, Macaulay Culkin and Catherine O'Hara, my mum, all the other people I've seen, Lindsey Graham, who passed away a couple of months ago, around the time my mum passed, I think he passed away. And I've seen him like looking very happy and blissed out, and as if he'd been reclaimed in some reclaimed is the wrong word, like I said. He was, again, just full of this sort of, just looked very happy and just rejuvenated. Sam Neill, who was in the Jurassic Park films, he the same with him. I've seen him in the same way, okay? I've seen many people who've passed on come through, and I felt them come through with so much love and so much peace. Again, there's nothing to fear about anything. God loves everybody, no matter what they've done, unconditionally. And that's the truth, okay? So in terms of the eternal child concept, these are the anecdotes I'd like to share for now. There is more to this, okay? Forgive me. There is more to this that I want to share, that I want to share and I have been sharing. What I'm keen on sharing is the detail in terms of samskaras, thought forms, the influence of the phenomenon, how thought, disidentifying from thought can liberate you, the traps it sets, all these other things, the trap, again, these things that we also need to be threaded with this eternal child experience that I've had from God, that could really help a lot of people, and to help us reform things on this planet, to be more compassionate towards people, and to see that there's the potential for us to do things very differently, very, very differently, to see that again, there is a way to break this cycle that's fundamental, and like I said, and transformative for all beings, and to view mental, what we call mental disorders, afflictions, behaviors as a result of traumas, all kinds of activities, criminal related activities on the planet that that we tend to just throw people in jail for, that we could reform everybody, okay, possibly on the basis of these things that I've come across, and again, and the truth of who we are, going through consciousness, and these passageways, I think, is what could really make the difference here. We need consciousness insight to be devolved into the public. We need to encourage like a consciousness awareness amongst the public, okay, if we can, in that sense. The phenomenon's influence is real. They do imprint on our consciousness, okay? Or some of us at least. Nephilim, their interaction with humanity is real as well, okay? The way they influence people, they try to manipulate perception, as well, amongst certain groups of people, thought, experience, emotion, and so again, I'm not saying that they're demons, and I'm not saying that we're trapped or anything, but they certainly have a trickstery presence on this planet, as I've seen, okay? And their influence can affect the trajectory of a lot of people's lives, okay? And it happens very subliminally and through consciousness, okay? And identifying that could really help a lot of people, I think. And it could help us look at the trauma cycle a lot differently. There are lots of, we can look at the way criminality very differently. We can look at the activities of people involved with disclosures very differently. Like I said, take out the blame for these things and look at things more compassionately. If we see that people have come into this world as innocent children, again, as you do, full of hope, full of, again, and even children who are troubled in whatever way, we have compassion for them, unconditional compassion. Think of what rubbish has got into, and this is the truth of it, what rubbish has got into people's minds, okay, as they've grown up, to make them do some of the things that they do, okay, because that's the truth of it, okay? What rubbish has got into people's minds about who they are, what lies about who they are, what has instructed them to think so badly of themselves and even others, for instance, that they would act in certain ways, okay? And that is where the interesting part is. And I can tell you that thought is a big part of this, and samskaras, okay? And the fact that a lot of people have things cycling around in their consciousness that don't even belong to them, and lies that are being told about who they are as they've taken on as part of their identity, okay? Which they which don't reflect their true nature, okay? So again, we can look at this through the eyes of compassion. We can see people differently if we take this approach, okay? If we look at people and think, what got into their head? What lies had got into their head? What have they been told about who they are that's making them do this to themselves and other people potentially, okay? So what has happened there? What is the lie? What is the lie? Okay, what is the thought that is there in their consciousness that is making them do this? Okay, and so like again, I've done a huge deep dive on this, for the past. I mean, I've been analyzing. First of all, because I don't want to make this about me, okay, personally, okay. But I've done a lot of deep diving through consciousness exploration. I've had to do a lot of working on, working out like why people do things the way they do. I've had a lot of trauma in my life, a lot of challenges. I don't want to talk about all that in this video, but I've had an eventful life, okay? And, I've had to try and find ways to look at people with more compassion, okay? And one of the best ways I found to do that is to look at them, first of all, well, through the eyes of God, as much, not that I have the eyes of God, but to appreciate their predicament as, to see them as children, as God loves them as unconditionally, okay? The other thing is to think about their predicament. What I realized is, there are instructional, there are the samskaras, for instance, they're very crude. The samskaras are a Buddhist concept. Some people call them thought forms, but basically what they are is anything that's a product of doing in this reality. So everything we experience pretty much forms as samskara. And samskaras can be very instructionally crude and instructional. They act in our subconscious, and if you pick up things that along the way that are not necessarily the best, okay, they can tell you absolute lies about who you are, okay. And I have come to realize in my own experience, so having to look at my own things I've done in my life, but then looking also at other people, that the rubbish that has been sort of, like I said, circling around in my consciousness, that telling me all this stuff, various things about who I am, but also other people as well, things that have been circling around in other people's lives. I've had an appreciation again, looking to see them as victims. Okay, victims. Okay, I've taken the blame out of it because I realize that they're victims. Okay, these people are victims, because think of how awful it is. Like I said, you're a child, how awful it is to have your life sabotaged by this stuff. Okay, because it is a tragedy, and we can look at it that way. Okay, the tragedy is all round. Okay, and this isn't me trying to make minimize the victimization of people, because it's real and I know what that's like, but I also think, we all know what it's like to make mistakes, and obviously there's a spectrum with that. But nonetheless, like I said, I think if we make the mindset shift that these people are actually victims, which they are. Imagine having a child who you love so much and has so much, ahead of it, and so much potential, and or you have so many hopes, and it has so many hopes and aspirations and things it loves and things it, you hope it's going to be, and then, but imagine something happens, or it just, something gets into its head, a bit like Inception, and it sort of affects its entire idea of itself, or themselves, sorry. And from that point onwards, it's rattling around in its consciousness, this thought that it can't even perceive or hear, potentially, and the rest of its life is ruined as a result of something, again, that it couldn't control, and it entered its awareness and it can't regulate because doesn't have the it hasn't analyzed it, or can't perceive it. It may have forgotten that whole thing ever happened, but nonetheless, that thought that may have caused the disruption in the first place, or upset in the first place, is nonetheless still in its awareness and affecting its behavior from from its subconscious, okay, into the conscious. I'll give you an example. Like I said, I use this quite often, but so imagine a child being told by a parent or someone else, you don't matter, okay, you don't matter, okay. So that child then hears it doesn't matter, okay, and obviously it's probably very hurt by that. They're probably very hurt by hearing that, and then so it probably then not probably as it grows up then further, it will have that forms a samskara in its consciousness, okay. It forms a thought form, it forms like a psychic barnacle, psychic plaque in its consciousness, okay. And the psychic plaque covers your true self, okay, and we gather this psychic plaque over the course of our lives, and this is what we're talking about, okay. So psychic plaque gathers over the course of our lives as a result of experience, and that our true self, like I said, gets obscured by this, okay. So that kid then has heard that they are that child, sorry, has heard that they are forgive me, that they are not worth anything, okay, or not worth it. Sorry, I can't remember what language I use now, but that they don't matter. That's what I had said. Sorry, forgive me, that they don't matter. So they've heard that, okay, and then they go from that point onwards. They may have forgotten about the incident. They may have been hurt by it, but they may forget about it, and then they forget about it. But then they go forward with their life, but it's still there. But it affects them from that moment, from their subconscious, and there will be what happens with samskaras is that very often they are triggered when we experience similar events that relate to the original event where the samskara was formed. So there may be an event in the future where the person feels that they don't matter. So, or they may feel like they are being judged in some way, or that they are being like, again, they may that samskara may then arise then in their consciousness, and that feeling be compounded. But the samskara can also be present and affect them, again, without that having to be the case as well. So, for instance, it may be that from the point of that moment, and like I said, there is like a tripwire that in our consciousness that triggers, I've noted this, where you know, a samskara may be buried in our subconscious, but then it gets triggered when a similar event happens in our waking experience. Okay, and so you know, in our conscious mind, sorry. And so that samskara will emerge then, and it will be used like a pre-programmed thought to for us to use, to draw upon in that moment. Okay, and so but that child, again, forgive me, that's going around thinking to itself, that has that crude samskara, that crude thought from playing in its subconscious mind, saying that you don't matter, is very possibly, very likely going to then go on, forgive me, and forgive me, forgive me, go on and potentially do things that are reckless as a result. So you can imagine there's this crude thought from playing in the back of the mind: you don't matter, you don't matter, you don't matter, you don't matter. But the kid, the child, or the adult doesn't hear that. Okay, they don't hear that thought form coming through. It's acting, is repeating. However, it's in their subconscious mind. Okay, so but nonetheless, they're affected by it, and they are then act out. They do things then which reflect that. They act recklessly. So they may take drugs. They may harm themselves. They may you know, feel suicidal. They may make poor choices. They may endanger other people. Okay, they may do things that are very reckless in that sense as well. They may act basically in such a way that they feel like they're invisible, or that they feel that people don't care about them. Okay, which could make them do harmful things. The problem is, you may say, well, they should know better. But how can we say that if there is a thought, and thoughts are very powerful? How can we say that if there is a thought in its subconscious which it hasn't or no awareness of, okay, that it's acting in such a way upon its conscious experience? How can we say that about that person if they're not able to perceive the thought that's affecting them? Okay, they're not to blame because they were told a lie in the first place. That child who